Hello and welcome to Creativity Uncovered. My name is Abby Gatling and I am on a journey to uncover how everyday people find inspiration, get inventive, and open their imaginations. Basically, I want to find out how people find creative solutions and then how they use those at home, work, play, and everything in between. And my goal for this podcast is that by the end of it, you'll be armed with a whole suite of tried and tested ways to summon creativity the next time that you need it. Now, today I'm speaking with Jacinta Dietrich. Jacinta is a self-confessed slashie. She is a neurodivergent and bisexual writer / editor / podcaster from Naarm, Melbourne. And she has about 1 million cool creative endeavors on the go at any one time. So today I really want to find out how this came about. What does that look like? And how does she manage it all? Welcome, Jacinta.
Thank you so much for having me. You make me sound so fancy.
No, I mean, you are fancy. And that's why I'm so happy to have you on here.
Thank you.
Yes. So, well, Jacinta, I've never heard of the term a slashie before. I mean, I kind of know what it means, but did you come up with that, or how did that come to be?
No, I saw someone else use it and I've pinched it because every time people ask oh, what do you do? It's always been really, really hard to explain all of the different facets of what I do with work and my hobbies and things like that. And, sometimes my hobbies make money. And I found that if I wasn't telling people about a particular part and then they found out about it afterwards, they're like, oh, why didn't you tell me? So it's just easier to have something that's I do a lot of things. Here is the opening for you to ask what all those things are, rather than me being when someone says, oh, what's your job or what do you do? I'm just oh, well, I do all these 50 things. What do you think? It just made it a little less overwhelming, I think.
Yeah. It's full disclosure up front. I do this, and this and this and this and this.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I love that. I love the fact that you haven't just put yourself into a box of one particular thing. You're I'm interested in these whole range of things, and that you can invest in all these different creative outlets and make the most of each one. So what are some of the things that you do?
So I'm a writer. That's currently probably the thing I'm focusing on. I say currently, I mean this week. So I've published a novella and I've been included in a couple of anthologies. So trying to get my first full-length novel finished and out there, which is exciting.
Yes.
And then I'm an editor when I have other free time. So I do that freelance where I'll, do structural or copy editing for other authors and things like that and give them notes, because that's what my university background was in. And then I do a podcast as well called Differently Brained. So we interview guests who are neurodivergent or have struggled with their mental health and just kind of have those conversations to break down misconceptions and stigma and open things up. So those are the main 3 that I do at the moment. And then there's, a bunch of side quests, as always, that pop up and go and things like that.
I love the term side quest as well. It's so it's so nerdy, but it's perfect.
It feels like that's what they are. It's just oh, I'll do this today. It makes me feel better if I didn't do the thing I said I was going to do in a day, because I'm oh, I did a bunch of side quests. It's fine.
So it's just a really nice way of saying I got distracted.
Yeah, correct. But, I still did things with being distracted. So here they are.
Yes. And you mentioned your podcast as well, and I'd love to talk to you about that a bit later, because I think there's a whole bit on that, which is actually how I found you, is through your podcast. But yeah, so tell me, how did you get to this point where I know the gig economy is a thing now, right? We're all doing all these different things to try and make little bits of money instead of just focusing on one full entire job. But how did you get to that space? Because it's a slippery slope into the gig economy. Where did it start?
I it kind of happened accidentally, I think. So it was kind of a bunch of little steps that I didn't realize. So I did a master's of creative writing, publishing, and editing because I'd always loved books. And for a really long time, everyone suggested become a teacher, become an English teacher. And then, you know, all through high school, because English is compulsory, you get the kids who just don't want to do it and they don't want to be there. And I just knew I think that would genuinely like hurt my feelings every day. And I was like, I'm not tough enough to go into a classroom and teach a bunch of kids who don't want to be there. Like, I see the value in it and maybe one day they will too, but that was just going to hurt my feelings and I'm not necessarily tough enough. So I thought, well, how else do I work in books? And, you know, I'd always been a big reader and had like ideas of being a writer, but I also like never genuinely thought I would do it. I thought I'd just like, you know, write on the side, and I was like, okay, publishing is the way that I can get in, read a bunch of stuff, support other people to make their books and things like that. And so in that master's degree, because it had a creative writing portion as well, I did a creative thesis. So I wrote basically 20,000 word novella that I then submitted at the end and thought, okay, well, I've got this big thing. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I'll submit it around and see if I can get any feedback, which I know is very, very unlikely and uncommon in the publishing industry because no one has any time. But I thought I'll try it anyway. And I sent it to the teaching press that was aligned with the university that I went to, expecting like, you know, a really polite, no, thank you, but here's the areas that you could expand. And they picked it up. So that's how I got my first novella.
That's so cool.
It was really, really wonderful. It was such just a wonderful time and such a whirlwind because it's with a teaching press, so it's based on semesters. So basically they picked me up in like November, December, and it was published by the following July. So it was a tight turnaround. And then from that, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe I'll just do a bunch of submissions and stuff like that. And just sent a bunch of kind of the stuff that I'd worked on during uni out. And that's how I got into the anthologies. I made it into editing because I realized like, you know, I was still thinking I was going to focus on publishing and the writing was just like a side bonus. And so I got a job at an educational publisher, which I was very, very lucky that, you know, my boss at the time was absolutely wonderful and really developed me and things like that, took a chance because I had very little skills outside of the university degree and they were looking for someone who had a bit more skills. But she took a chance and that was wonderful. I'm no longer with that company. That company's closed down. So then I've started doing freelance editing because I still have those skills and things like that. And I was picking bits and pieces of that up while I was working full time just as something to do, especially if I wasn't writing anything at that point. And then the podcast came kind of like the novella, like on a whim where I'd been thinking about it for a couple of years and looking for something similar and hadn't found it. And so started talking to Lachlan, who is now my co-host, about wanting to do a project, and he was complaining about having a lot of free time. Not complaining, but
like, I've never heard that complaint before.
He was looking for a project to do, or looking at, you know, working in a different industry, or looking at getting into publishing and things like that. And I said, hey, like, I don't have any necessary like tips there because he lives outside of Melbourne and most things are in house. But do you want to start a podcast? And he was like, yes, very much so. So things, I think it's like, I don't know, my neurodivergent brain just like gets attached to an idea and then we're like, well, what's the worst that could happen? Let's go. And that's how I've landed in the gig economy.
That's cool. I love the fact that you've given yourself the permission to explore these ideas that come into your brain. That's very cool.
Thank you. It's such a weird balance because some days, like, I don't really know how to explain it, and I haven't tried to explain it yet, so this is my first go. But a lot of people are like, oh, how are you so confident and things like that? But then I also have like hectic imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And so I've got this like idea where like, oh, what's the worst that could happen? Just jump in, just do it, blah, blah, blah. And then the next second I'll be like, I can't do this. What am I doing? Oh my gosh. And I somehow just do it. I don't know. It's weird. I don't know how the two battle in my head, but I'm grateful that, you know, they balance each other out and I'm still doing things.
Oh, yeah. I think it's impossible to be confident 100% of the time, but I think pushing through those periods of ultimate fear
Yep.
is what is so expensive, you know, and it really takes you to the next level. Because if you just stayed within that little bubble of yours, you'd never explore, you'd never create, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
So your podcast, Differently Brained, love it. How long's that been happening for?
We started in January, so yeah, less than a year. Almost 9 months now. It's been really, really wonderful.
Yes, it's so good. And so you kind of mentioned this before, you're trying to break the stigma and have better representation out there of neurodiverse individuals. Is that where you're coming? That's what the podcast is all about?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm autistic and an ADHDer, and I was like, I've read a lot of books and things like that. I especially enjoy YA, so I read a lot of like neurodivergent representation in there. But once I got my diagnosis, I kind of wanted to know what it was like for other people. I just wanted to dig into, you know, what other people are doing, how it feels for them, because obviously like it's a spectrum, but it's not like a line spectrum. It's more like a pie chart where different parts of neurodivergence or whatever your deal is, like, can be different. So like for me, my social skills, I would like to think, are relatively neurotypical kind of thing. I hold conversations, I make eye contact, all of that stuff that people assume is normal. But
that's inverted commas normal for people, by the way.
But I have like a lot of sensory things. So like I can be really easily overwhelmed by noise and lights and, you know, things touching me, people being in my physical space, things like that. So I wanted to kind of get those personal stories, and I was looking through podcasts hoping that I would find something. And in the time since I started thinking about Differently Brained, there has been so many more podcasts. So I always feel a bit like it's not true anymore. But when I was looking, there wasn't enough personal stories. There was some podcasts that had a lived experience co-host, but then also they had like a medical practitioner or someone with a psych background and things like that, and they wouldn't talk necessarily about personal experiences and stories and things like that. It was more teaching you about like the different things, I guess, the different terms, like teaching you about stimming and executive dysfunction and emotional dysregulation and things like that. And I already knew all of those because I did the screening. I came out with the label. I wanted to hear what it was like for people and what the good stuff was, and, you know, how they function and what their houses look like and what their relationships look like and what their special interests are and things like that. So yeah, like I said, we're all really lucky that there's a lot of different podcasts that do it now. Have conversations with other people and figure out what they were doing. It's very selfish.
No, I mean, that's it. Like I was saying to you just prior to this podcast, that me running this podcast is helping me feel so much more energized and more creative. If your podcast is giving you that as well, why not?
Yeah. I think it's really like, this is not to toot my own horn, but I'd like to think that it is making a safe space for people who maybe don't know or are self-diagnosed and things like that, and just want to hear more stories so that they feel more validated, because there is a lot of imposter syndrome when you're, you know, looking into, am I autistic? Do I have ADHD? Things like that, because you're like, maybe it's confirmation bias, maybe and it can be like a really rough time, even if you don't have all of the other barriers and stigmas that we find in society and the medical profession and things like that. So I'd like to think that it's a safe place for those people, and then also a way of, having mental health conversations and things like that. It's something that my family's struggled with a lot. We have a lot of history of mental health issues, and it was always very stigmatized and not spoken about. That wasn't fair on anyone in my family, and we didn't get the help that we needed. So I'm hoping that, having these conversations and bringing it up, I'm just also helping to push forward, the mental health and neurodivergent change that we need to support everyone.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're telling so many diverse stories on the podcast that there would be opportunities for people to tune in and identify with one of them, or it might help them unlock something in them, or just kind of break the stereotypes. Because,
yeah,
I mean, when we spoke a couple of weeks ago, you told me that when people know that you're neurodivergent, they were surprised to hear that you're creative, because there's like this perception that you wouldn't be. You'd be very like analytical, maths brain. But when you kind of tell people that you're creative, or they see that you're creative, it's really shocking to them. So
yeah,
that, like, tell me about that.
I think it's been kind of two different reactions. So, like, people who've known me for a long time kind of thing, when I got, my labels, my identities, my diagnosis, whatever you like to call them, for some of them, they're like, oh, are you sure? Like, does that check out kind of thing? And I think it's because they had the idea of, a maths brain, a science was a computer tech, kind of that kind of idea, which they've all been wonderful and supportive now, and it's all fine and everything. It was just a bit of a surprise because those stereotypes are out there. Yeah. And then same thing, like, I'm very, very open about being neurodivergent. It's the first thing in my bio after my name, things like that. Because I think it's not really considered that, neurodivergent people are, of course, in the arts and in, those kind of spaces. It still feels like there is very much those misconceptions and stereotypes that, the only way that neurodivergent people are creative is in very logical kind of areas, and also the misconception that because routine is very important for some neurodivergent people, like particularly autistic or autistic people and things like that, that routine can clash against creativity. And it means, I think sometimes people have an idea of creativity as being like spontaneous and fun and all of these other things that go against what I think the idea of routine is for a lot of people. And I think there's that clash as well of, oh, well, if you need to do, similar things, have similar meal times every day and, wear similar clothes and stuff, how can you be imaginative and things like that? Oh, sorry. I got a creaky chair.
No, that's all right. Yeah, that is interesting, that the idea of like routine and structure is kind of the antithesis of creativity. I never thought that, but that is an interesting idea that people have a stereotype of.
Yeah, which I don't think it's accurate at all. Like, obviously, at some point it can feel restrictive doing the same thing every day, but that's not necessarily what my routine is. And by having like my routines more like I block out time for certain creative pursuits and things like that, so that I know that I am being stimulated in lots of different ways, because the ADHD brain really constantly wants that novelty and that interest in things like that. So by kind of blocking out, like, I'll do writing here and I'll do some podcasting here and things like that, it actually like feeds into that creativity, and I'm able to jump between them all and get that dopamine hit, and then also like really interweave all of those skills and things like that. Like, I don't know, for me, routine and structure really helps the creativity.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's it. Everyone is so different. Some people hate the idea of blocking out my calendar for this and blocking it out for that. But, if it enables you to be your best creative self.
I think that's it. I pushed against it for a really long time because I held on to the idea that having a routine meant that I wasn't spontaneous, which meant that I wasn't fun. And I've obviously changed because changed my mindset around that, because at the end of the day, if the routine is what lets me do as much as I can, like without the routine, I can't do my 50 million different things. So if having that structure is actually what allows me to do it, that is what's fun for me.
Yeah. Lean into it. Because you are doing so many things and, you know, running your own editing business as well. How do you keep up with that? And I know you just said structure here, but how do you stay motivated? How do you stay creative when you're switching lanes so many times?
I think it's kind of that's what comes to me most naturally. So that's probably why having maybe like a bunch of different side hustles or whatever works better for me personally than like a traditional workplace or a traditional job, because some days I'll just want to write and I can just fully sink into that. And then other days I don't want to do that at all, but I obviously still need to make money and do things. And so by having those different areas to kind of flip between, it's kind of like what you were saying earlier with, you know, these conversations giving you energy and things like that. By having the freedom to be able to decide each day what I'm going to work on, it means that I'm not fighting against my brain. Like I'm going with the hyper focus and I'm going with what's interesting to me in that moment. Which, you know, obviously in a professional sense, I'm giving myself deadlines and making sure that I still, you know, meet requirements for clients and things like that. But being able to do it in my own way is just so much easier than, you know, if I were in a traditional job where it was you have these 3 different things or you have to do this email every day and things like that. By having the flexibility to create the structure, I think is how I balance it all, to be honest. And by not putting too much pressure on, like, this is my one main thing, by having them all as kind of semi-equal, it means that, you know, I don't feel guilty if I take a day for writing and, you know, podcasting gets pushed to tomorrow, or I don't feel guilty if we do a bunch of interviews and then I can't do, you know, I don't have the energy for something else, because it all balances out long term.
Yeah. Are all your little side hustles, are they all bringing you money, or some of them purely just to fill your creative need?
So at the moment, I am very, very, very privileged, where I was made redundant and got a redundancy payout. So at the moment, so everything used to be previously funded by, I did have a full-time traditional job. And the last few weeks, they're not, like, they've brought in money here and there, but it's not consistently what I live off. So that's a transition period that I'm in now, whether I will have to go back to a traditional job or if I can make one of these or each of these make a bit of money that'll make ends meet. But no, I'm in a very privileged position where I had savings, because I understand obviously not everyone can just do the things that they want to do. I understand that I'm very, very lucky to be doing my side hustles, because no, they do not bring in the moolah just yet.
Yeah, I mean, that is the hard part with some of these creative endeavors. Like, they're so fulfilling, but making a living out of them is a whole nother ball game. Although actually one of our episodes is all about that, like pricing your creative process and outputs and stuff like that. So that's a pretty cool episode. But that's interesting. So, like, do you think that you have like an insatiable appetite for creativity, or do you think there's a point where you're going to go, all right, that's enough side quests, I think I'm just fine for now? What's your view on creativity that way?
I used to think that it was like a tank and I would run out and things like that. My opinions are definitely changing. I genuinely think that, again, because of like the ADHD brain and the craving for novelty, I think if I can manage to make something work, I genuinely do better when I'm doing my own things. So I do think that I will constantly be finding different stuff forever. The cool thing about writing is that, you know, I can be in the same industry but doing different things. So that's got a lot of flexibility. I imagine I'll stay in books forever. I just don't know what that'll look like and if I'll be one of those genre hopping people or if I'll even be able to make money and things like that. But no, I genuinely do think that creativity and novelty for me really go hand in hand, and, you know, thinking about things differently and finding the different ways to do things is probably always going to be part of how I work and how I live. Many, many side quests to come, I reckon.
And what would you recommend to people who are, you know, say they're in their 9-to-5 job with not much creativity? How do they find their first side hustle or explore a bit on the side to get more creativity in their life?
It's so hard because, like, I know how much time, effort, energy a 9-to-5 takes, especially for neurodivergent people. Like, being in an office was so hard for me. You know, having someone else's structure put on me was really, really hard, things like that. So it genuinely was just little pockets of time where I thought about, okay, what do I like doing? You know, I thought about how I've always been reading, and I used to do a bookstagram and things like that. So that was a passion project for a bit and things like that. And it's just, I'm kind of lucky that my brain will seize on an idea and then just hold on to it until I have the time to do it, or being my beautiful neurodivergent brain will get distracted and make time to do it. So I do think it is hard when you're trying to do a 9-to-5 and then also find a side hustle or things like that. But if it's something that you're passionate about, if it's something that you've been thinking about for years, it's worth jumping in because you've clearly got that passion for it. You've clearly got that interest. You've clearly got that love, and that's going to be what motivates you to do it when, you know, you've clocked off and you maybe don't want to look at a screen again and your hobby is screen-based or things like that. I think it's just do what you love. I know that sounds so tacky and privileged.
But it's true. I mean, there's way more, you're way more able to stay motivated and engaged if you truly love it. And
yeah, 100%.
If you're not finding it in your job, then you've got all this opportunity outside of that. But it does seem like when you're too tired, too busy to do it, maybe pushing through, because, you know, you'll get that energy from it once you actually start it. But starting it is the hardest part for so many people.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think I see it as kind of, you know, when you've got to push like a really big kind of cog system, and that first push is the hardest, and then after that it's going to go okay. Yeah, that's how I think of it when I, you know, feel like I've fallen out, or I don't have, you know, the creativity that I want or need at that time. I just kind of think, just push through. The cogs will start working if you just push that little bit. Kind of works.
I love that. So, like, now you're at this really cool point where you've got some cash to allow you to explore all these different things. What do you want the future to look like?
Oh, that's a good question. I would love to write books. I would love to, because I still feel like I absolutely adore my novella, but because it's a novella, I still don't know if I can call myself like an author. Like, does it count? It's half a book. I don't know.
You're an author.
So I would like to feel like I've earned author. I would like a full book. I'm really, really passionate about, you know, obviously neurodivergent representation and things like that. So I think that is going to be a really, really big part of my writing from now on. Obviously, I was writing neurodivergent characters and I just didn't know it because I didn't know that about myself. But of course, you know, bits and pieces of the author is always going to make it in, especially with your main characters, whether you know it or not, it slides in. So it's nice now that I'll be able to go into projects knowing that I can, you know, use my voice and my experience and make own voices material and really champion neurodivergent representation in the way that I wish I had seen it, you know, as a kid and even now still as an adult. And then, yeah, just podcasting and things like that. we'll see how long the money lasts. Maybe, in 2 months' time, I'll be back in an office job, but I'll still be doing these things on the side. And ideally, I'll be able to, just do my creative endeavors long term. It just depends on the money.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it comes back to a lot of the time, doesn't it? But who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe your podcast could lead into a book for you. I mean, you're having so many cool conversations. You're getting great stories from people. Could be the fuel for another book.
If you could get a bunch of publishers to hear that and get in touch with me, yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
I'll do my best. You're actually the second guest who has said that to me. Oh yeah, I've got publishers and distributors in America, but I don't have one in Australia yet. I'm like, okay, yeah, leave it with me. I feel like this is going to be my side hustle now. It's going to be publishing or accidental. I don't even know what it is. Book distribution. I'm not sure.
Accidental literary agent.
There you go. I'll add that little slash to my LinkedIn. Oh no. Well, that was fantastic. I really appreciated talking to you, Jacinta. It was a lovely sort of chance meeting of you online, and I'm so pleased that you reached out and this conversation was able to happen.
Thank you.
I think you're doing some really cool things, and I love the fact that you are just kind of letting your brain go wherever it is and do all these different cool activities. I think it's going to be really inspirational for people to hear this today.
Thank you. It's much easier to let it go than to fight it. So lean in.
Lean in, people. You heard it here first. But I also want to say thank you so much to everyone who's tuned in to the episode today. I really hope that this episode of Creativity Uncovered has inspired you to lean in, follow the adventure, and as always, I hope that it helps you summon creativity the next time that you need it. If you've made it this far, a huge thank you for your support and tuning into today's episode. Creativity Uncovered has been lovingly recorded on the land of the Cubby Cubby people, and we pay our respect to elders past, present, and emerging. This podcast has been produced by my amazing team here at Crisp Communications, and the music you just heard was composed by James Gatling. If you liked this episode, please do share it around and help us on our mission to unlock more creativity in this world. You can also hit subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episode releases.